Hi and welcome to this video in our Banking and Financial Markets Careers series. You can see the QR code on screen if you want to visit the sector page for all the resources that are listed in this video. This video is called Is It the Right Career for Me?, where we explore some of the pros and cons and elements involved in working in banking and financial markets that might help with your decision. Of course, this video will just form part of your research and won't replicate actually going and getting experience and talking to people in industry. It's really an impartial way for you to consider some of the things that are involved in making a decision about a career in this area. So what we're going to cover are some of the pros and cons, maybe your salary expectations and career progression, looking at key skills and qualities needed for the area, and the different types of roles, as well as how to align your career choice with your core values. There are other videos in this series which cover some of these topics in more depth. Let's start with your career choice and your core values. It's important, firstly, that we consider bias. We may be coming from a course or a university program where lots of people go on to work in banking and finance, or people in your college talk about it as a career area quite strongly, and that means you're maybe just being taken along with that tide. It might be that you have visions of really high salaries and you want to have, you have that vision of this as a career that will give you that the money that you are kind of hoping to earn for yourself. And you may have seen this sector in particular in lots of kind of film, television, people on YouTube, influencers talking about working in the financial sector, and you feel like that's kind of really strongly influenced you. So the point of looking at these questions on screen is just to find out where you sit with them. How are they influencing you? How much of this has come from your own research? How much are you relying on other people's views of the sector? So there's four main zones to consider when you're thinking about how to make a decision. The first is knowledge. So what information do you have, not just about the sector, but yourself as well? The next is process. So how do you get what you need? How to answer your questions, approaches that you take? How do you derive meaning? That's step 3. So have you been thinking about careers in banking and financial markets? What does it mean to you? What assumptions have you been making? And finally, that's identity. So how do you see yourself in relation to this career? Does it fit with your natural identity as a person? Do you see other people in the role? Do you want to be the first person, from your background to go into the role? What does it mean for your identity? So that's another important thing. We won't mention these specifically, but they're really good things for you to have in the back of your mind. It's also really important to think about inhabiting our decisions. So what do we mean by that? So pros and cons lists can be really helpful in just organizing our thoughts. And I've put some examples of things on the left that are both pros and cons, depending on what your view is. But we also might want to think about what these things mean to us. So are we thinking about banking and financial markets because we want a really big salary and what that means to you? Does it mean better social status, for example? Is it that you want that for better material things, a better quality of life? Is it that you want to be part of a really big group of people, on working for a really big employer? Do you want to go and work in a boutique firm? What that might feel like? Is it that you want a big city career, that you want to be working in hustle and bustle? What that might smell like, feel like, sound like, look like to you? Is it that you want a role that has a mixture of emotional intelligence and, your IQ? Is it that you want to be, solving really hard problems every day? But the kind of ethos behind inhabiting our decision is to think about how that feels. So what it might look like, what it might feel like, what it might taste like to, be under stress, for example. What might it feel like to, have the adrenaline of working in certain organizations? So just really thinking about everything it means to take a role. And that's important when you're, entering into really competitive recruitment processes where you can get caught up in that. So pros and cons can be really useful because they just help us to organize. And listen, for some people, pros are cons, and for some people cons are pros, so it's really down to you as a person. It might be that you're interested in client exposure, to being, on the inside of society, making big financial decisions. There are very few things in our lives that we see and touch that are not involved in financial decisions. How much our energy costs at home, how much we pay for our fruit and vegetables, etc. There's also lifestyle to consider, so long working hours. How close are you to actually decision makers? Could it be repetitive? So just thinking about what's working for you. And of course, it's a very complex sector. So for some roles, you're going to have some of the cons are not going to be cons, and vice versa. So where might you fit? Well, it's really important to think about when you're thinking about what's right for you and also the biases, is to think actually where you might work. Now, again, this is a really complex sector where you could work in, so many different areas. So I've really just put up the kind of most well-known and popular areas for graduates to go into, and people from advanced degrees. And you can see really we're looking at kind of banks, investment management, technology and fintechs. And of course, those things are an ecosystem that overlap and is not clear-cut. But you'll also think about what role you might be in. And here are some common kind of role titles that will come up. So analyst, junior, associate, researcher, trader, quant. Those are things that are probably quite familiar to you. Of course, there are many, many more roles that sit underneath these headline roles. Banks, investment banks, trades, funds, fintechs take a number of different roles, including operational roles. So you also want to think about the impact you might have, how much you're earning in your role, the structure of the firm, the size of the firm, and the type of client they have as well. So all of these things can help you decide whether it's right for you. And these are good places to start some of your research. It's also worth thinking about the type of experience that you might get to help you make a decision. Now, lots of roles in this sector go to people who have done insight experiences, been to events, and gone to do internships. We know that around 70% of graduate roles go to in investment banks and large bulge bracket banks and boutique and top tier investment firms are from interns. About 70% of those roles go to people who have essentially got previous history with the firm. But you can think about whether it's right for you through lots of easy access ways. So right now you could go and get some virtual work experience from somewhere like Forage, Forage. You could join societies and any of their trading activities or their guest speakers, their events, their panels. You can join some EDI initiatives. So for people who are underrepresented or from underrepresented backgrounds, you could go along to events, undertake mentorship, or even get work experience. You can join insight programs where you might just spend 1 to 3 days with the firm. Spring weeks, more traditionally for very early entry level positions. That can be anything from a few days up to a week with a firm, and you'd be applying for those in your very, very early in your first year. If not before you actually attend university, or if you're in a 4-year degree in your second year. And then you have formal internships, which take part in the summer, or if they're off cycle, you can do them as a graduate. And we can talk more about that in our recruitment session. Here's an example, and it's just one example of a multinational investment bank's business areas. And the things that are framed in bold indicate the usual graduate routes. So like I said, there's a number of different roles and from in different divisions, but it normally tends to sit on that left-hand side. And what you'll see there is that there are just, a number of different roles where you'll have to show different interests and skills. So thinking about whether it's right for you as a sector can sometimes mean getting into the granular of what the role actually means. If we go and have a look at a hedge fund team structure, for example, and this is a very, very basic structure of a very small team, you'll see that they are a lot smaller and a lot less complicated and have slightly more hierarchy. And will still encompass that investment teams as well as the operational teams. And at very entry level, you're probably looking at an analyst role. So, you're going to be thinking about whether it's right for you. You're going to be thinking about the sort of team you want to work for. Now, hedge funds in particular, and banking and financial markets, it's quite well documented in film and television. It's seen as quite a glamorous, high stakes occupation, which of course it can be over and above all the hard work. So I've just illustrated some of the teams you actually see in film and television. Now, this is from The Big Short, which is an adaptation of a book by a writer called Michael Lewis, who also wrote Liar's Poker, which I recommend. And you'll see here the different kind of size and types of hedge fund and investment firms here, as well as you've got your Deutsche Bank here. You've got the sales executive from Deutsche Bank here, and the different types of personalities and skills. If you've seen the film, you'll see how different they are. They are all, of course, male, but you will see some improvement in the sector there. So just thinking about the different roles, they're not always this angry, but there are some high stakes, of course. And in this case, in this film, life-changing and world-changing events of which people are responsible for. So it's worth just thinking about, again, sometimes this can help us think about our bias. So where are we getting our information from and what do things look like? Next, you'll see here the structure of a private equity firm. Again, a very basic structure here of a team. Again, hierarchical and has both investment and operations roles. You're much more likely to go into private equity and hedge funds from already gaining some experience in an investment bank or a larger financial institution. But things are changing and you can get more entry-level roles, particularly if you have very good specialist skills. And what happens to Cambridge alumni then? So if we have a look at the different types of job roles that Cambridge alumni have gone on to do and their employers advertise with us, we've just tried to split this around humanities, social science and STEM subjects, just to give you an idea of what people can do and where they can go. Now, this is made up from multiple sources, but generally, these investment roles are open to people who have got any degree, really, obviously depending on their previous interest and experience. And then, of course, we come right up to the STEM roles here, where you'll be seeing people with far more specialised interests, specialised skills. So it's worth thinking about where you'll fit and what's right for you based on your skill sets, and the perception being you need to, be from a finance background or be a, financial expert or coding expert to go into all roles in this sector. Of course you don't, and there'll be a lot of context to what people have been doing. These are real outcomes from people from Cambridge, so hopefully that's encouraging to see that just the various types of roles there are. Now, just staying on the humanities and social science theme, we've got some panels that we've recorded by our Cambridge alumni as well as others, where they have been through humanities or social science backgrounds, and they talk about how they've made that transition. And you can watch the Research Careers Banking and Financial Consulting panel on our YouTube channel or catch up on past talks page. And I've just pulled out a quote from Beatrice, a speaker from Birnbach and now works at UBS, who did equity research, was from a history background. And she says, we're paid to have an opinion, and we have to be able to articulate why we have that opinion and to use that opinion to help others inform their decisions on what they're doing with their money. Fundamentally, it's not super dissimilar from being sat in a tutorial with someone who's really, really smart and opposite you and trying to argue your case in an essay. So what you can see there is that there are lots of soft and transferable skills that we're getting from our study that are completely applicable to what seem like technical careers. And here is a very rough map around skills where essentially I've had a look at job overviews from eFinancial Careers and mapped them here onto our this chart essentially for the different sectors. And what you can see is actually quite broadly, you need a real range of skills. Now, of course, some technical and coding skills are going to be needed across roles that have that as a core part of them, but really actually what you see is there's a very broad base of skills that are needed across lots and lots of different occupations. It's also worth knowing that you can use an application process to find out what is right for you, because recruiters into particularly specialist firms are very passionate about putting the right person in the right job. So here we heard from Angus, who's a quant trader. Again, this from our research careers panel. And he says, when I applied to Jane Street, I guess I didn't actually know which one of those I wanted to apply for, whether that be a trader or a researcher. I didn't know what the difference between a researcher or a trader was. And I thought, I prefer research, I prefer maths, I want to apply for a research role. And it kind of really only internally was I guided towards the trader role. So that can be part of the process as well. That's why going to company presentations and trying to talk to as many people who are actually working in roles is really important. It's also worth thinking about exit opportunities as well, and which part of the market will help you to get various exit strategies. So some people either go up, they get promoted, they go out and they go and work for another type of investment firm or bank. They go to sideways, they go to a very similar type of institution and in a very similar role. Perhaps they just want to change of face or location. And then you have people who go out into industry. So they want to use all their skills they've used to go out and work in industry and perhaps start their own business, or people who decide to actually go into, let's say, the third sector or use their skills in other ways. So non-profit making, maybe policy and government, to actually think about using their skills they've delivered, but not in such a corporate environment. Okay, so let's go and now discuss other things such as aligning your values to the sector. Now, when you're thinking about banking and financial markets, often we do get that kind of corporate view of it, and therefore, is that always a good thing? Is it, values aligned? Well, when you do your research into the sector, it's an important thing to think about, which is, how am I going to feel at the end of the day out of work? How am I going to feel when, I'm working with particular clients? How am I going to feel in the environment? What do I want my kind of stamp to be on the role? So it might just be not about the sector, but finding the right role for you. Now let's think about whether something's right for you on a values basis. Let's think about the impact you want to have. So it's a really good question to ask yourself. What impact do you want to have in your role? What impact do you want your employer to have? So not just you, but by working for an employer, what impact do they have? And then subsequently, what part are you in that? And then thirdly is thinking about the impact you want to have on the world. Is banking and financial markets the right place for you to have that impact? And for some people, it absolutely is. And for other people, they could be looking at other areas. So let's take, for example, impact investing or ESG investing. Now, a really interesting way to think about this, and it's the same way to think about whether consulting is right for you, is to think about what goals you have. Now, here are the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. They might not be right for you, but it's a start-off point. What are the goals here that you see yourself wanting to be part of? What impact you want to have in these areas? And it's useful to think about investment firms that do have impact in these areas, that are aligned to these areas, and how you might align yourself with those types of funds or investment. So I recommend some resources on the screen that can help you to dive into those a little bit more. But there are financial investment, impact investment funds, ESG investment funds that do work to goals that are sustainable, that have positive impact, and they want to have a positive impact while, of course, still making profit. So how could you get involved in impact investing? Well, it's a whole webinar in itself, but you could think about venture capital. So going into venture capital for ventures that have positive good and have, are backing ventures that align to your values. You could think of an impact fund. You could think about banks, insurance, and pension funds that are investing in things that align with your values. Or you might think about doing investing in investment management, maybe for a charitable foundation, such as the Wellcome Trust, for example. We do have some videos on all things around sustainability and thinking about ESG as well. Just one recent one is our Careers in Sustainability series, where you can see my colleague Darren talking to Sophie Walker. It's worth us thinking about in the plenary, just before you close off the video, the pros and cons. Maybe think about this video and what the pros and cons are, where you might be on that list now, now that you've thought about things in some more depth. And I do have some recommended resource and reading for you. So you can go to www.careers.cam.ac.uk, go to the sector page and choose banking and financial markets to get access to these. This includes the eFinancial Careers Career Guide, which can help you with the skills and sector overview, the Banking and Financial Markets Quick Guide to Recruitment, some of our videos that are on YouTube, as well as our PDFs and downloads that can help you to work through the recruitment process and understand the sector a little bit more. I personally have been recently reading Andrew Ross Sorkin's Too Big to Fail. It's a bit of an older book, but I've been really enjoying it. As I say, as well as Michael Lewis's Liar's Poker and When Genius Failed by Roger Lowenstein. Slightly older books, but really good to get into the history of the sector. So what to do next? Write a list of your motivations, what's really drawing you to this sector, and how might you find out more about how they align, going to sector insight talks, going to talk to people who are actually in the sector, attending webinars. Reflect on your experience in this sector. How much do you actually have? What are you basing your information on? And where might you get some if you don't have much? Consider why banking and financial market careers fit with your personal values. So what are your values? What are you hoping to get from this career? Where might be the place for you to go? And what can you do now to prepare? So not just your applications, but in terms of your identity and how you fit into this sector. How are you preparing yourself as somebody who's knowledgeable and able to enter the sector feeling like that's somewhere where you belong, or how you might create a place that you belong, and what might your identity be there as a change maker. Thanks very much for listening. There are other videos in this series that you can access, and I wish you all the best with your job searching, with your career research, and please do visit us if you need any more help.